Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member. So I'm from Nevada, and we have challenges like everyone else with respect to access to rural broadband. So I'm very excited to hear and have this discussion today. And so thank you for all being here. Mr. Hendricks, you made a number of references in your testimony to smart cities. And this is an area that I'm very interested in working on, and I'm glad you raised it. I'm curious, did you partner with a community under the DOT challenge last year?
I would have to check. I don't recall doing that. One thing I will say is I think Nevada has been probably the most forward-leaning customer that we have dealt with in our discussions. It is very clear from the governor to the legislature to the members of Congress that there is an interest in making Nevada an attractive place for tech investment, and we've had a lot of fabulous conversations with cities about doing smart city deployment kind of work.
And this is why I bring it up, and I'm grateful that, Mayor, you're here as well as a representative. I've worked in state and local government, and I think there is an opportunity at the federal level to help incentivize and incentivize local, state, private sector to come together down a path. And I think in Nevada, our future is in technology and in promoting technology, and you see that happening. And that's why I bring up the smart cities. This is an issue that I'm interested in looking at federal dollars to help incentivize communities to really go down this path, both rural and our urban areas. And I'm curious if that's something that you would be interested in seeing in the future as well.
Yes, I think very much. In my testimony, I described that I think to the extent that there will be funds available for fiscal activities in an infrastructure bill or in another context, Nokia very much would like to see priority given to those verticals, including smart cities. And I think there's an opportunity there. One of our biggest challenges isn't dealing with unreasonable cities, it's dealing with cities that may not have a process at all. And so you can condition participation and receipt of some of those dollars on adoption of a comprehensive zoning ordinance for these kinds of things to facilitate it. So there are some incentives that can be built in that I don't think have to be punitive in their nature, but we very much support funding for those kind of verticals.
And so, because I only have a short amount of time, and I would love to hear also from you, Mayor, as well as Representative Weniger, and let me add this to the discussion. Because of my background in working in local and state, there are often times when what you do, and you talked about zoning issues, infrastructure issues, you know your community better than everyone, and not every community is the same.
Right.
And when we're looking at going down the path in federal legislation and what we need in this space, I want to make sure that we at the federal level are coordinating and listening with our local governments, our state governments, and the private sector in each community. But I find as I jump into this area, there are too many organizations that are out there. Nobody's talking or communicating. I know that we have a Broadband Deployment Advisory Committee created by the FCC chair, as well as the Broadband Opportunity Council and a number of other committees who are all focused on addressing and solving these issues we are currently facing. And these various committees each have the same intent, but have vastly different makeup, and they're not always talking and sharing the same data. Would it be simpler if we just designated a lead federal agency that really focused on addressing and bringing in those local governments and state governments and private sector to address these issues? Or I would be curious about your thoughts on how we make sure we have that level of vertical communication and that we're all sharing information to the benefit of our communities and the technology that we want to promote.
Go, or you want me to?
I can go real quick. Senator, you make some great points, and I too I was a city councilman, and now where I'm at the state legislature, so I kind of see all sides of it, including I own restaurants, so I've gone through zoning and different things. I think one of the tough problems is that there's this old paradigm of you have this break between the electeds and then you have the people who are in the zoning department who definitely, I mean, they fought us the hardest. But the electeds wanted it. I guess it's different than what the mayor's saying, because they don't want to have every council meeting and have somebody down there, you know, the place fills up because they're putting up a large macro cell tower. And so they like this kind of being off their plate. But I think you make a great point on the smart cities part. because also too often, cities always think that everything the planning department has to be paid for by fees. And I've never believed that, because you zone a Walmart or whatever, and you have sales tax coming in that's generating money for the city to pay those salaries. And the amount of money and just on the Internet of Things that can be generated just for private business, but then not only that, for the cities, through smart cities, through efficiencies, where they're going to save money, where they don't have to go check every water meter or the trash cans kind of things that are coming, is enormous. I mean, and that's just going to get bigger. So, yeah, if there can be some organization speaking with one voice, or the Senate, and the Congress speaking with one voice, and interact with the cities, and I think it's just kind of an education process of breaking these old paradigms and how business has been done for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Senator, first of all, I do appreciate your comments, and you're right on. My father lived in Nevada for 20 years, and I spent a lot of time there, and I've seen some of the communities that have excellent broadband service, and other communities in Nevada and in Florida as well that don't have the competitive choices that we all deserve. There are a lot of barriers now that have nothing to do with local regulations, but unfortunately, these are programs that have been in place for many, many years, particularly by the federal government, that do prohibit innovation and deployment of technology. For example, there are communities, including mine, that are undergoing major roadway construction projects using federal dollars. When my city undertook a several $1 million roadway construction project on Dixie Highway, which is a major road through my city, we wanted to install conduit. Very simple. We just thought it would be used by the industry for broadband purposes, and if we can install it as part of this construction project, pay the labor and extra material costs, which were minimal, that this would be a win-win. But the federal funds that were funding that construction project prohibited us from doing that. And that exists with respect to a lot of federal programs, as well as a lot of state programs. A lot of times we're doing these construction projects with state dollars, and you can't use those funds to support dark fiber and conduit, which is silly, really. And so those are some of the things that we should look at eliminating. With respect to the committees and which organizations should take the lead on coordinating all of these efforts, it just seems that right now, I think some organizations have a goal in mind and then set up a committee to reach that goal without really wanting to go through an honest process, unfortunately. We're very concerned, for example, the FCC's Broadband Deployment Advisory Committee, which I think one of my colleagues here is on. But I think that committee's goal is to adopt or suggest local ordinances for cities and counties to adopt to support the deployment of broadband technology. The problem is there's only 1 out of 29 members on that committee who's a local official. So the local officials are gonna be very skeptical about anything that committee comes out with. And another committee of the FCC, the Intergovernmental Advisory Committee, which I chaired until 2016, the governor of Connecticut is the chair of that committee, and she requested that the FCC appoint somebody from the IAC to serve on this Broadband Deployment Advisory Committee, but that did not happen. So I know the National League of Cities is working now with industry members, with stakeholders from counties, from states, and they've created a task force to try and come up with basically an education package for local officials around the country. And I'm sure that they would be willing to work with any stakeholders in this area to support broadband deployment in a more effective way. You look at municipal broadband as well. There are communities that the only way they will get broadband service is if the municipality makes the investment. Right. In Florida, as well as in states throughout the country, that is prohibited. So you have some policies in place, either on a state and on a federal level, that prohibit the type of investment that local governments want to make sure that their residents do have access to competitive broadband choices, but are prohibited from doing so by existing policies.
Great. Thank you very much, and thank you for allowing me to go over